The protagonist is a blonde with snow-white skin that seems to radiate something possessive. Her name is Arundel. It is very sad to remember, however, the mother was a concubine from the beginning, and it was under such conditions that the girl herself was born. I know of nothing else. Life has turned out to be, to put it mildly, not sweet. Half-brothers and sisters were monsters, and therefore, without paying attention to anything, humiliated and abused the poor girl, using beatings. Even given all the sorrow of the years of her life, the blonde can't accept the ring she is persistently offered on the street. The girl is near the city market where she was sent to get groceries. The old man in the cloak, who does not give away his identity in any way, offers only to try on the item instead of paying for it. Belle freezes as if she's standing still. Such an offer sounds extremely tempting, for she only refused because of the lack of money she was never given for her needs and expenses. Grabbing the ring, the lady gently twirls it in her hands, and then tries to put it on her ring finger as quickly as possible so she can reach up into the air and watch it glisten in the sun. Expectations are not always met, even if sometimes it is desperately needed. As soon as the thing is in its rightful place, an incredibly bright light begins to emanate from it, filling the space and almost blinding the eyes. The man, still remaining in place as if nothing had happened, smiles. Muttering something to himself, he says that the ring suits the young lady because it was made for her. The dimensions do match perfectly, and also the glow is suspicious. Hearing such words, the blonde only opens her mouth in surprise, unable to say anything. At that moment, there were absolutely no thoughts about it at all, so it was impossible to think that things would change for the worse. The ring appeared to be infused with magical power. Since wearing it, the heroine has managed to die and be reborn 4 times. What's weirder is that it was the same reason every time. Who rebelled to become emperor, Prince Castan. It was this young man who was the ambassador of death, which was rushing straight after the young lady. Arundel never managed to get a good look at her opponent's face. He always appeared to be one step ahead, skillfully utilizing his vast knowledge, which clearly helped in battle. The first time everything happened quite spontaneously, because having sentenced the blonde to death, the man chained her up and then simply cut off her head in front of most people. The second time was no less strange, but no more ingenious, for she was beheaded again, but this time with a sharply sharpened sword ready for her mission. Then a third time occurred as well. The beauty was captured and taken to the castle, thus signing her death sentence. But in her attempts to escape and save herself, she was hit by hundreds of arrows, which with the speed of a comet pierced into her body. The last time was the cruelest, but the heroine didn't even have time to think. Blood spilled in a scarlet stain right next to the motionless body, while in her head, the girl once again cursed Castan and his insistence. These memories brought no joy, only anger. Swinging some sort of thing, the blonde screams as if asking what she should do, while again throwing verbal blows at the prince, who is getting fed up with her. Her strength is exhausted, so sitting down on the bed, the lady lowers her head and sighs heavily, trying to get more air into her lungs. She definitely needs to find some other effective way that fits as a weapon. Strange thoughts pop into my head that in normal times might seem crazy. It might be worth meeting with Castan to talk about something. It seems like a delusional idea, but there are flames of determination and anger splashing in the heroine's eyes that will never find its calm as long as this nerd is alive. An ingenious plan might work, so Arundel decides to make attempts to seduce the brunette, who, unsuspecting, is likely to fall for the bait thrown in. Jumping out of bed, the blonde runs over to a table over which a mirror hangs. Looking into it, the girl begins to examine herself, taking note of the fact that she doesn't seem to be ugly. The date of Castan's rebellion has been known for quite some time due to the fact that this is not the first year of the attempt. This year just happens to fall at the time of the girl's coming of age. There's not much time left until then. Until then, the maiden simply must survive at all costs if she still intends to make her plan a reality. She's going to meet the prince, so it's worth being secretive. After dying 4 times, the girl realized that it was worth trying to change her life. The arm pushes the body to the side with unreal force. All the power seems to be centered on her at the moment, and there is something concentrated on the ends of her fingers. The blonde is sitting on the ground because she was literally pushed out of the wagon for trying to say something, or at least somehow support the conversation that was actively going on all this time between people. The heroine had only 2 enemies. Number 1, Mortis, and Lilith Bellerophon. The guy yells about how the lady is a crazy girl, and after all the predictions, as expected, has lost all sanity. The carriage turns around and is whisked away, closer to the bridge, to get into town, leaving the girl all alone. These two have never behaved according to their status. Today, high society gathers, and before the rebellion, the prince hail a significant role in the affairs of society. Adjusting her dress, which has long since become like a ball of mud, the blonde tries to stand up. She had come here only to plead with the crackpot rich, and without any invitation at that. Rising from the ground, the lady quickly heads towards the forest. All this was done for the sake of her future, and in the end it was not successful, because no one wanted to help a person like her. As she passes the most vegetated area, the girl freezes and tries to figure out if she's definitely seeing something in the distance, or if she imagined it because of her poor eyesight. My eyes don't fail me, because there's definitely someone out there. A young boy is lying under a tree on the grass, in a pose as if he just decided to lie down and rest because he was bored. Deciding to take this step, the maiden approaches a few meters away. She is lost, and so it will be possible to ask him for directions to get to town, thus helping herself. Everything was going smoothly until, after taking a few more steps, Arundel bumped into a small pebble, which just happened to be waiting for her right next to the man. As she stumbles, the girl's only thought is how clumsy she is. Preparing for the contact of her face with the hard ground, the heroine squeezes her eyes shut, but it does not happen because the surface is suspiciously soft. The guy who woke up to the rustles turned out to be an airbag. Lifting up slightly, the girl scrambles to realize what just happened and who exactly she's lying on, while knowing the answers perfectly well. The young man stares with his amber eyes, as if wanting to sizzle the beauty right on the spot, not giving her a chance to go anywhere. The man turned out to be none other than Kin, Castan's bodyguard, who helped with a task that was an impossible labor for one man. Holding out the letter, the brunette alerts that this paper was sent by the prince. Grabbing the letter sent, the blonde begins to smile as much as she can, because she didn't even count on such an easy outcome. The man next to her asks if she really likes it, to which she gets a nod. On the paper were words neatly written out in beautiful handwriting. Castan wrote to his beloved Arundel, whom he believes with all his heart, completely unaware of the whole truth. During the correspondence, the maiden managed to learn a lot about her future husband. He turned out to be much kinder and gentler than she thought, because as practice showed after the previous times, everything ended badly. The bodyguard enters into the beauty's warm thoughts, asking if she really likes Castan. Even if he changes beyond recognition one day, a girl is bound to love him in any form. Trying to correct himself to give more accurate ideas, the brunette asks if Arundel will accept him for who he is regardless of whether he becomes emperor. Freezing, realizing that everything has been planned for a long time, the blonde frowns and trying not to give away her emotions, asking what the point of asking the question is, because it sounds strange. Keen looks away a little, not quite sure what this is about, or if he's just pretending not to let a not-so-good shadow fall on him. When everything just started, the man made a terrible impression on the heroine because he behaved extremely strange and always remained rude. Sitting on the roof, the couple is talking about something, while the lady abruptly interrupts the conversation and asks, as if clarifying whether Keen has friends, to which she receives a denial. She doesn't have anyone else either, so the offer to be friends sounds tempting. Turning toward the young lady, the brunette asks for something to promise. He's not much of a talker, and that's one of his main character traits. The hiccups before the main thing and the long pauses already seem native. Not quite understanding what the new acquaintance is hinting at, the beauty switches her gaze somewhere upward to the starry sky, which has long since been lit up with thousands of lights. Looking somewhere in the distance again, the guy asks for a promise that when her friend gets sad, she will find him right away to help her no matter the situation or difficulty. Smiling and nodding her head vigorously, the lady agrees to this condition, so now they have a pact of sorts. It was then that the pair became the closest of friends who seemed inseparable, but only Arundel herself thought so, who failed to notice the impending trouble. Before your eyes appears a sword that is all in the blood of the servants, who with all their might tried to resist to the last. Sitting on her knees, the girl tries to catch her breath, trying to figure out what's going on and why exactly now things happened this way, thus ruining the whole situation. Right beside the body of the beauty stands a young man who, after calling her name, lowers his blade, preparing to strike again, but deciding to have one last conversation. The maiden thought Keen was her friend, but was clearly mistaken, for the man turned out to be Emperor Castan himself, who was now prying for information. He asks again to repeat what she said a long time ago. Such necessary memories come to mind, when long ago the lady assured me that she liked the prince despite all the deeds. She was playing a role, but no one knew it. Smiling, the beauty, after being interrogated by the bodyguard, always answered with just one word, confirming her honesty and sincerity of her intentions. Now the whole situation did not seem so rosy for the maid, who again sees death, which almost catches up with her once again, as if trying to take her with it with the help of Castan's hands. The man asks to be tricked, while not giving any exact statement regarding this, trying to get the lady to talk. She only shakes, clenching her hands into fists. Dropping to one knee, ignoring the people lying behind him, the guy asks to say just a few words to keep alive. After that, the maiden will be able to be close to him. Approaching, being only a few centimeters away from the frightened face, the brunette grins. The lady wants to live, so she found him for her own selfish purposes. A single tear rolls down her cheek, while giving no definition, for the lady is already tired of crying. She seriously didn't know that the kin she could call her friend was the Castan who had killed her several times, who now demanded that the girl say she liked him. Mother always said just one thing that turned out to be true. Something strange could happen to Arundel one day, and it wouldn't hurt to be extra careful then. Running up to the bed where her mother is sitting, the girl gently peeks into her eyes and asks interestedly why she should try to be careful. If the little one is frivolous, she may get into an unpleasant situation that will then turn all her notions upside down. It can happen even if you let your guard down, even for a single moment. Such a small moment can ruin an entire life in the future and possibly have worse consequences. The day it all happened was indeed strange from the start, but it was made up for by the sun shining brightly and the blue sky seemingly beckoning. The voice, feeling sorry for the maiden, laments that she has no money at all, and nothing at all, and no matter how hard she tries, she won't be able to get anything at all. The poor girl is too pathetic, and absolutely no one can feel sorry for her, because she doesn't want to ask anyone about her next move. That kind of weird advice sounds disgusting. The elder reaches out and pokes the body of the lady with his index finger, who steps back a few steps. She has no family or parents, which is why she is so unhappy. The details are too specific, so the beauty quietly interjects what the man means, approaching another meter and being one step away from the young lady. There are only pathetic people who live under the same roof with her, because she really has nothing left. Resentful because of what she is told, the girl thinks about the words spoken. Painful to realize, however, the old man is right and seems to know her whole life story. Resting her hands at her sides, the blonde frowns, no longer asking questions as her interlocutor leans in even more. She wishes she could just walk away and forget about this strange encounter. Suddenly, the old man grasps the young girl's hand, then takes something out of his pocket, and carefully, trying to be inconspicuous, puts something in her palm. Quietly apologizing, he talks about how sorry he is for having to say all those stupid things. Looking in his hand, the maiden notices the ring, because it is a kind of apology for the words spoken. Freezing, the girl scrutinizes the thing, starting to object. She can't accept the ring for nothing, realizing that there's no point, since the gift is too expensive. Smiling and pretending that everything is fine, the heroine, trying to be friendly, assures the interlocutor that everything is perfectly fine, because after all, he apologized, thus making everything better. Giggling, the old woman repeats her words. She doesn't care at all about the young lady's words, because she should still at least try on the jewelry, even if she returns it later. Nodding her head in agreement, the beauty accepts the item, for she simply cannot deny such a luxury to herself. Now, plunging back into these moments, it seems to Arundel that she was enchanted by something from the beginning, and the ring only accelerated the process of becoming an infinitely living being. Carefully putting on the ring, the girl did not think about anything, because in her thoughts was only how beautiful it would look on her in the afternoon sunlight. Examining the finger, the maiden notices a slight sheen that seems to start growing larger and larger by the minute, hinting at how unusual it is. My eyes are blinding, so I have to cover my face with my hand because of everything going on, hoping that this craziness will end soon, allowing me to get far away. After a few minutes, the girl manages to open her eyes, removing her palm from her face and noticing the incredible shine that comes from the thing that was given to her just a short time ago. A voice is heard stating that the jewelry is very suitable for Arundel, as if made for her. However, turning around, the girl stiffens. She's trying to figure out what it is. Confusion grips my gut, for there is no one around who looks like an old woman in a cloak. People are scurrying back and forth about their business, completely oblivious to the abnormal person. Fear is displayed on your face, and then, preventing you from thinking straight, blocks all avenues of trying to remove the ring from your finger or looking for the person you just stood next to. It was this moment that became the key moment in the chain of events in the heroine's life, and it was this moment that she later regretted very much. When the girl was only 2 years old, her mother became a concubine in the Bellerophon family, where the head remained, of course, the hated Duke, who did not care about everyone around. Hoping for nothing, the blonde tries to turn the situation in her favor in order to provide for herself and her daughter at least something. Asking if the man will definitely go for such a deed, the beauty gets a slight agreement, because everything was already decided long ago, without any people who live in the castle as servants. The only condition of the mother was to give the little girl the surname Bellerophon, so that she would not have more problems in the future, from which it would not be possible to get rid of anyway. It was only 5 years, which turned out to be a torment in reality. The girl's mother could not stand such loads and terrible attitude, so in tears always begged her daughter to do something for herself in the future. Seeing the most horrible character changes is one of the worst things in this world. Grabbing Arundel's shoulders, the woman always asked that she not live like her, but find a better way for herself. Asked never to do so, the mother went to the next world, leaving the little girl all alone. Her last words were that very line, which came in very handy. Fate did not work out properly, so the Duke did not give his surname even after the death of his concubine, although he promised to do so more than a decade ago, back at the beginning of the journey. After breaking the contract, the sibling bullying only worsened. Lilith very often dragged the heroine by her snow-white hair, humiliating her in every possible way, showing that she is far inferior to her. The brother, in turn, was not lagging behind, always kicking the girl with his feet, being in even greater gusts of inexplicable anger, which went entirely on the free sister. Thoughts that seemed the darkest never let up, making him consider just running away for freedom. At the age of 18, the beauty tried to forget her mother's will, realizing that it would be better this way. It was in this year, according to legend, that Prince Castan rebelled with the help of consequences, ready to want to seize the throne and become emperor. In giving orders to his loyal knights, he wished them to capture all enemies, and this included the Bellerophon family, which was by list one of the most loyal to the state and government. The first to be caught due to her ineptitude was Arundel. She tried to prove that she did not belong to the Count's family, for she did not even have the Count's surname, which he denied her, but all was unsuccessful. The half-brother and sister scoffed at the words in every possible way, realizing that no one was listening to the hated person and was not even going to listen to her, even though she was screaming that it was true. The estate of a widely known family was burned the same evening after all the captives were locked up in it, preventing any attempt to escape. Sitting in her room and thinking about why she had been killed in her previous life, the girl tried not to cry because life was clearly unfair to her. If she had a better chance at a normal life, things would be a lot easier. There would be no bullying from the rest of the people and a lot of other things as well. Had the girl had riches, or at least a high social status, she would definitely not have been able to remain as miserable, being at the bottom, being all alone. The executioners, standing a step away from the stand where all the action will take place, are talking about something. One of them rejoices greatly that they have finally caught Bellefonte, but the other interrupts him, saying that he has better news. As he shackles the blonde, the man talks about how the family was warned by someone and they were able to escape, leaving only one prisoner to be found on the estate. No one caught them, even though there were many reasons to do so. Such information makes Arundel weep, for she had hoped that the Duke would finally get what he deserved. The imposition of the death penalty seems to take forever. The former family and Castan are bound to get what they deserve one day because of everything they've ever done. It is sincerely hoped that the prince will die of a lightning strike. An old woman's voice is heard in my head, saying that she would be glad if the maiden liked her gift. Grabbing her neck, the heroine tries to gulp in air with her mouth just to make sure everything is okay. Freezing, the blonde looks around. A quiet sigh of surprise escapes his lips as if on its own. Grasping her body again, the lady tries to grope her body to make sure she is indeed unharmed, though she doesn't realize what is even happening. Carefully running her fingers along her neck, the girl strokes the skin. She's definitely safe and sound, even though she still feels like the inevitable is about to happen. Looking around the crowd of people, the beauty swivels her head. hoping someone will give her the kind of answers she needs most right now, aside from water. Without focusing on anything, the girl realizes that this is exactly where she took the ring. Or rather, it was just shoved into her palms, insistently begging to be tried on. Standing in the middle of the bazaar, the blonde flaps her eyes as she begins to slowly realize the whole situation and what may have happened to her in the past. She had just died, but now, somehow, everything was back in her hands. For that was how Arundel's first rebirth beamed, despite the fact that she had not planned it at all. There is one ancient tradition in the Empire of Trapeum that no one in this life has managed to interrupt yet. Only someone with black hair can become emperor. For some reason, it was believed in family circles that the darker the hair, the higher the divine power of a person. Only a dark-haired man can ascend to the throne, for there is no other. It was not so important how many children the emperor had, because in the family could be born only one child with black hair, thus immediately becoming a follower of the father. This time it was different. The first son that Empress Julian gave birth to, Prince Jupiter Depert, had hair of the right color, thus getting in line. There was another son born to Talia, a concubine who went missing and returned when he was 14, Prince Castan Depert, also with hair blacker than tar. The two heirs were similar, having only slightly different personalities and facial features, dissimilar in identity to each other as two drops. It is for this reason that the atmosphere around the crown is not exactly calm, and that makes sense considering this has never happened before. There was complete silence in Belafonte Manor, and only a woman's excited voice was trying not to wake anyone, almost shouting that something strange had happened here. Leaning against the wall, the girl sighs. She just couldn't die and be resurrected, because it's easier to believe something even more absurd. It all feels like someone's evil joke or a dream you want to forget. Glaring at the objects in the room, staring mindlessly into the distance, the blonde realizes that she's probably right and she's just having a nightmare. Memories popped into her head, as if trying to remind her of their existence and trying to remind her of everything that had happened, convincing the lady that every picture was real. It seemed like something strange. However, feeling that pressure on her neck again, the girl is transported back to the moment when she was screaming to be let go while insulting Castan. Then there was no choice but to believe in rebirth, but deciding to make it so that this time it would work out not to die, the maiden fled so that she would definitely not be caught. All was going well, however, in the forest. She was attacked by guards from the prince's infantry. They stalked the lady and then made sure she got caught up in the failure that was going to pass her by this time. The information the Duke had gotten could be used to escape. She'd already tried to sneak into the palace, so she tried to talk to her stepfather. The reaction was not the rosiest, for the man did not want to believe. Screaming about how it was utter nonsense, he resented it, for the girl dared to lie to him. The Empress has great influence in the palace, which means it won't happen. After numerous failures, all seemed lost, so the blonde began to think that her life would be permanently encased in a wheel of death. The heroine kept dying, which meant they had to come up with something else, something more interesting, because nothing would work without a plan. The result is deplorable, because it's all about the ring. She came to the conclusion that she manages to resurrect every time only because of the jewelry, because it, like a talisman, saves the girl's soul. The cause of death remains always the same, and this was clear without any mental calculations. Castan was becoming the man who killed Arundel time after time, remaining ruthless. The blonde just had to find another way to make some sort of difference. The first item on the plan was to meet the prince, even though it seemed utterly absurd. The man was known to participate in social life in order to keep track of the dynamics of the mood of the nobility and the people around him, which means that the lady is obliged to join the society. The beauty had no invitation, for she was going to show up there for nothing. It didn't need to, considering the plan had been tamped down in his head for a while now, taking into account all the missteps and potential losses. That's how the lady's meeting with Castan is supposed to go. If everything goes according to plan, she will be able to get close to a man in order to get as close to his plans as possible. Everything should be at its best, and maybe the blonde will even manage to seduce the guy, because looking in the mirror at her reflection, she did not consider herself ugly. In 2 days' time, that cherished day was to come for the fulfillment of the first step. At the meeting with the County of Lycia, the girl asked the carriage to stop and drop her off in the street. The brother and sister, who were still the most hated people in the world, would be traveling down this very road. The lady managed to bribe the coachman so she can do the same. The right wagon is seen from afar, and in the same second, a smile forms on the beauty's face. It is Duke Bellerophon's coachman who is obliged to take the heroine to the castle. Instantly jumping out onto the road, the blonde spreads her arms, forcing the horses to stop and the coachman to try not to run over the beauty in his path. A few minutes later, the girl was already sitting in the carriage, leaning back and smiling, realizing that everything was turning out as best as possible. She asks to depart so she can get to the location faster. Lilith, sitting next to me, quietly asks what this is all about, because by the feel of it, something has definitely gone wrong. Mortis, fixing his glasses, can't hold back any longer, so he turns to shouting. He asks what Arundel is doing here. This party lover certainly couldn't miss something like this, so it made sense to meet him on the wagon. Folding her hands as if in a pleading gesture, the blonde begs to be taken to the meeting as well, to which she hears Lilith's disgruntled muttering. She asks that her brother stop the coachman, for if the creature is with them, they will become a disgrace. Exclaiming once more, already insistent, the girl asks for an indulgence, but only this time, especially since she won't even be noticed, and her presence will be more like air in its transparency. The screams get louder as the sister asks if she wants to embarrass them since she's trying to beg to be taken along, even if the lady promises to sit in the corner. Grabbing her dress somewhere near her neck, the man begins to shake the girl, repeating that there is not an ounce of sense or logic in her words. The heroine is called a parasite, with absolutely no intention of trying to defend her or do anything else, but instead by denigrating her. No longer intending to endure it, the blonde gently raises her hand, talking about something and asking if her brother knows the feeling of his head disappearing from his shoulders. Grabbing her hands around the guy's neck, the protagonist still won't shut up, talking about how her brother knows exactly how it feels. If the head falls, it will be like an apple falling from a branch. Lifting her palm higher and higher, the girl buried her fingers in her hair. It was pretty realistic when the apple bounced in front of people like a ball and rolled in front of all the people standing around. Deciding not to continue her interesting story, the blonde grabs onto Mortis's clothes, already openly threatening. She begs him to leave her alone, while Lilith simply asks him to show her mercy and sit back in her seats. Realizing what just happened, the girl takes a few steps back. Things didn't go the way they were supposed to, as another conflict occurred on its own. The heroine just snapped. His arm snaps out of the beauty's strong grip and swings around, about to do the irreparable to push her out of the wagon. Left all alone on the street in a sitting position, the maiden stares in tears at the drifting traffic, listening to the glory of how strange she is. Quietly exhaling air and trying to calm down after everything that has happened, Arundel can't understand why her free relatives are so nasty and arrogant. Rising from the ground, the girl shakes off the hem of her dress. Everything that had happened didn't matter at all, because she had managed to get into the Count's territory, which meant the job was half done. It was already evening outside, but the moon had not yet appeared, indicating that the sky was quite cloudy, which meant it was going to rain. The conclusions that everything is great were made too hastily, for the lady realizes that she doesn't understand exactly where she is or where she should go at all. Walking to the side to try to find her way at least home, the girl realizes she is out of luck, for something or someone is in the distance. The man lying on the grass clearly attracts attention, but at the same time sows a grain of doubt, because who could lie in the middle of the forest unconscious? Shifting her gaze to the horse that stands only a meter away from her body, Arundel hesitates. The man looks like an aristocrat, which makes him even more attractive. Beautiful dark hair swaying slightly in the slight breeze that tickles it. Eyes covered, giving away no reaction to the stranger at all. Stammering slightly, the girl ponders what she should do next. A guy shouldn't take a nap right now because this isn't the right place. The best solution would probably be to just wake the youngster up. Lifting her dress to get closer to the victim of the dream more quickly, Arundel thrust herself at her new future acquaintance, gingerly looking under her feet. Being careful didn't help, for a pebble in the path thwarted the whole plan, despite how small it was. With a wild yell, the protagonist falls on something soft, immediately realizing what the deal is here. Feeling the stirrings from below makes her want to burn with shame, because she never thought something like this would ever happen to her. Focusing on the young man, the girl rises slightly to look into his eyes. He expresses no emotion except anger, which fills everything around him. Trying to get up, thus lightening the burden of the man, the beauty at the same time asks for forgiveness, because she does not want to get into new trouble, which will be even worse than the previous ones. Pulling the sword from its sheath, the young man shows his quick and well-honed reaction that he has developed since childhood. Making no effort to take his companion's life, the brunette deftly rolls over, ending up on top of the woman, who tries to turn around, thus freeing herself when asked who she is. Putting the blade to his neck, the guy doesn't seem set on being friendly, or on just letting the girl go. There are still bright lights blazing in his eyes. Leaning even closer and smirking slightly, it's as if Castan is enjoying the fear of his victim as he tries to crawl back. An unconcealed note of pleasure flickers in the smile and all the emotions in the moment. Trying not to push, yet making no attempt to put up with his temper and let the beauty go, the man orders her to answer his questions if the maiden does not want to be killed. Freezing in horror, the girl slams her eyes shut, digesting all the information she just received, which is becoming too much of a burden. My chest heaves as if there isn't enough air in my lungs. My heart is beating so hard that it feels like it's about to jump out of my chest and run away because excitement prevails. Cold as ice, the voice repeats its question once more. He needs to know who this woman is, and she is obligated to answer without any resistance. Upon seeing the blade, the girl shrank, just as her entire gut did. Memories came flooding back all at once, conjuring up images of what had happened to her in past times due to carelessness. Realizing that the silence was dragging on for an obscenely long amount of time, the man hums. The lady doesn't seem like she's going to give any answers to the questions posed. Because of ignorance, she is going to die, even if she doesn't really want to. My eyes widen, realizing that a few more seconds and all the effort will go to waste. The blonde sharply thrusts her arms forward, knocking the sword out of Castan's hands, who freezes, not realizing what just happened. The weapon, as if having lost any appeal, lies somewhere off to the side on the grass. To get the saber back, you'll have to stand up, thus freeing the beauty. Arundel jumps up from her seat and stands a few meters away from the brunette, who glares at her. It's strange that things have turned out this way. The guy definitely remembers holding the sword tightly, so this power raises questions. The eye is drawn to the ring, which even without sunlight gives off a slight glint that blinds the eyes of a knowledgeable person. Her fist clenches, thus hiding the stone a bit. Realizing everything, the man abruptly snaps out of it and runs up to the girl still standing motionless to the side. He can't miss out on such a valuable item. A hand grabs the lady's wrist, squeezing the arm hard, leaving purple and red marks. It is definitely not worth it, however. You need to check the authenticity of this jewelry. Being only a few steps away from Arundel, Castan raises her hand a little higher, placing it at his eye level. Asking if this ring is definitely the young lady's, the man squeezes her even tighter. Nodding slowly, the girl confirms the prince's guess, but then asks if the thing is familiar to him. The silence in response is literally killing. Changing the subject, the guy again persistently asks the beauty's name, to which she tries to object. You can't make him repeat his question millions of times, so this indulgence is a final warning. It's not that simple, so at any second it could simply collapse. Make a maiden one wrong move. This psycho shouldn't know the blonde's real name, so he has to improvise. This man probably won't be seen again, so might introduce himself as some aristocrat. The fictitious name becomes Elizabeth Lunar. A man's voice hesitantly asks if she is the Lunar's daughter, to which she gets a nod in response and a kind smile, with which the heroine tries to brighten up her situation. The real Miss Lunar is in very poor health, so she doesn't leave the house. No one but her parents know exactly what she looks like. Accordingly, the legend must work at its best. Humming, as if believing in the correct legend, the brunette talks about how excited he is to finally meet such a famous lady. Trying to smooth things over, the blonde assures her that everything is perfectly fine. Looking at the girl with a penetrating gaze, the man does not give himself away. However, he himself realizes the whole situation. It's just surprising to meet the sign, since the Lunar's daughter died last month. Laughing nervously, realizing that she has been exposed, the beauty tries to extricate herself from the situation. There is no law that forbids walking in an earl's domain, but the man insists on learning the maiden's real name. Deciding on another deception, the blonde is called Karina Dorvan, but she is interrupted. Na left to study with her brother, so these words are simply not valid. Now it's definitely come to an unhappy end. Lai doesn't just walk away, so the guy leans to the ground saying that he was interested. However, he got bored. Picking up the sword from the ground, Castan no longer wishes to play this game. If the girl lied again, she would definitely lose her head, thus putting her life in clear jeopardy. Trying to move farther away, the beauty, as if weightless, dreams of flying off into space. If she gets killed again, then there will definitely be no new plan, or the ring will decide to fail again. That psycho's out of his mind to make such conditions. Arundel would like not to give away her true identity, but it seems easier to do just that than to be left headless later. Retreating a few more steps and putting her hands out in front of her, the blonde calls out her real name, shouting the truth along the way. She wants to live and be here without any problems. Lowering his blade, the prince asks where the young lady lives, to which she gives the name Bellerophon. She is an adopted daughter, so she is not called exactly the same as everyone belonging to the family. Humming, the man thinks for a moment. Her name is indeed Arundel, which means it's definitely true this time. There's no point in trying to threaten further or do anything else. The gaze shifts to the details. If you look closely, the dress is shabby, and such a girl in this image will definitely not be allowed to the party, no matter how much she does not want to. The lady has a pretty face. Smiling, she asks why she's being looked at like a meatball, even though she knows the answer to her question beforehand. Quietly interjecting what the blonde meant, the brunette realizes it was just a joke. A brown-haired man comes into view, delighted to have discovered the prince after a long search. Taking the man aside, the boy begins to ask some questions that no longer reach the ears of the protagonist. The conclusions are self-evident, for it must be this lunatic servant. Judging by his clothes, he's also of noble birth. The man is Castan's personal knight, namely Cliff Bardell, who reiterates how glad he is that he didn't have to spend half his life searching. When the guy wanted to say the cherished words with the name, he was interrupted by a rough voice, which made the person standing next to him embarrassed. Such a reaction seemed strange. Bowing down, the young man apologizes, for it is his fault. However, it immediately changes the subject afterward. He's only here to inform the host that the party has just ended. Hearing these words, the blonde breaks down into a scream, showing her annoyance. It hasn't been that long, which means it's safe to assume that the whole thing is completely unfair. Something happened in the afternoon, so it happened that way. However, the lady does not want to accept what she has heard. She doesn't understand why all of this is happening to her and today. Calling her name, the girl asks where the party is, to which she is pointed with a finger in the direction. It doesn't matter about conspiracy and other nonsense, because it's been exposed long ago anyway. With thanks to the pair, Arundel heads away, turning only to say goodbye to the boys before her swift departure. Lifting the hem of her dress, the blonde noticeably speeds up as a single thought swirls around in her head. She has to get to the gym in time, and she may still have some time. Castan looks rather calm, only frowning while the knight looks more confused, for he didn't even know the name of the person in question since he arrived much later. Turning to the interlocutor, he speaks his conjectures, for he thinks that this is the lady who is extremely unusual, so also the adopted daughter of the Bellerophons. The man nods, as he has already realized exactly who the girl in question is. Prince Castan Deepert is preparing for a coup, so knowing the names of people in society will help him a lot in this case. Sighing, the guy wishes he could forget what happened as soon as possible. However, the only option left is to switch to information. So he turns to Cliff. It is worth studying this girl very carefully, in order to gather as much information as possible in the future. Bardell bows, promising he'll look into it so he doesn't bother his friend. It's only been a few hours since the holiday. The heroine moved back to the duchy while being in a foul mood after everything that had happened today. Walking into the main hall to just occupy herself while thinking about something, she notices the maids preparing the dining table for the family's upcoming dinner. Once in her room, the beauty closes the door as quickly as possible, and then falls on the bed due to a complete lack of strength. It was true, for the party was really over then, as sad as it was. Belle was trying very hard to get there in time to start making her plan with the prince a reality. However, things turned sour because of Mortis with a problem in his head and an obscure guy who is a threat to life. Burrowing more and more into her pillow, the blonde is ready to cry with frustration. Now things are much worse, and the worst part is the fact that she has absolutely no idea what she should be doing. Taking herself in hand, the heroine decides not to self-destruct before time. Resting her hands on the bed, she lifts herself up a little, saying no audibly. Determination is not your strongest trait, but it is worth making the most of it now. She'll definitely still have a chance to meet Castan. Just because something changed today doesn't mean it won't work out another time. Clenching her hand into a fist, the maiden shifts her gaze to the ring, which still shines brightly. Tomorrow, she'll go looking for that granny to get more of the answers she needs. The image of the old woman who said something about how the jewelry fit the young lady comes to mind. Osoba should definitely find out why she gave her the resurrection ring in the first place. It was with such thoughts that the lady fell asleep, and the next morning went to the very market where she had been yet, it seemed, so long ago and recently at the same time. The beginning of the search was the most difficult, for it seemed that no one had seen the right person. Approaching an older woman, the blonde, hoping for a positive response, hears a rejection. The next victim is a man who, hearing about his grandmother's growth, simply walks by, as if trying to avoid any questioning, hurrying about his business. Running behind him, the heroine loses hope, because it seems that no one has really ever met the old woman. Sighing, the girl realizes that it is impossible to give up, however it would be the best solution right now. Stepping back, she bumps into something, not immediately realizing what exactly the obstacle is. Realizing it's a living person, Arundel quickly apologizes, because sometimes if you don't have time to do that, people just get aggressive. After a few seconds, the girl freezes. Her eyes widen as if she's never seen the man in question in her life. Considering everything becomes clear, even without words. Bouncing off to the side, the maiden instantly begins to stutter, unable to believe all that is happening. It seems unreal that she has managed to meet the same man again, who seems to be in hiding. Lowering his hood and revealing his face, the young man glares angrily at the bumbling individual who calls him a psycho. Amber eyes, like a cat's, focused on her face, crossing downward and looking at the ring. Squinting, as if not realizing what just happened, the boy thoughtfully asks if the girl really called him such a hurtful word. You can see by the look on his face that he's not offended, because it's all just for the sake of mocking. He seemed to mishear something. Such words should not be thrown just like that, but it's as if Castan is trying to give hope of salvation for the young lady who has no control over her words. Deciding to file into the retreat group, the blonde carefully steps away, saying that she was just plain wrong and mislabeled. I mean, it can't be the same person. Belle keeps making excuses, trying to convince everyone that she didn't mean anything wrong. She just mistook the man for someone else. Frowning his eyebrows, the guy clearly wasn't going to accept that kind of answer. He doesn't want to push the girl like he did last time, however he doesn't know how to act any other way. A moment from the previous day, when Cliff arrived in the prince's office with a denunciation, comes to mind. He checked all the information about Arundel, but as said before, she's completely ordinary, as she's not even a member of the Bellerophon family anyway. Accepting the papers with neatly written letters, the brunette lowered his gaze to study the whole thing from cover to cover. Looks like the knight was right in what he said twice already. Beliefs were confirmed, for the life of a beauty was not so beautiful. The free brother and sister loved to abuse the foster child. She had no one to protect her. Trying not to interrupt the prince, Cliff still quietly asks if the future emperor wants to get rid of this maiden just like the rest of her family. Realizing that there's no way to escape, the brunette abruptly gets up from his seat, announcing that he's changed his mind. It will be easiest for him to handle this situation himself, so the friend can leave everything to him. Now finding himself in some strange alleyway quite close to his subject, the young man pulls his hood tighter and tighter. He doesn't understand exactly where he should start. Pulling the brunette out of his thoughts, in which he is stuck obviously for a long time, the blonde asks why the young man is looking at her so strangely, not the first minute. Deftly extricating himself from the situation, the guy points to her hand, saying that he cares absolutely nothing for the maiden. He's only interested in her ring, so she can keep her nose out of his mouth trying to boost her self-esteem. Without making any attempt to seize the thing, the man only shifts his gaze back to the hand of his interlocutor and asks her where she got the ring from and how long ago it appeared. Talking about yesterday, the girl tries to lie as quickly as possible and get away from this strange guy who clearly wants to get on her nerves. Approaching Arundel, the prince leans in, saying that he had asked as recently as yesterday not to make him repeat his questions twice, but to answer them the first time for the sake of speed of the process. Frowning his eyebrows, showing his displeasure at the behavior, the brunette only says that he's been very busy lately. Too much upcoming work to finish quickly. Taking a step back, her interlocutor realizes there is nowhere else to move, as there is a stone wall right behind her. You should not make your man wait outside, as this will be the most unwise decision for both of them. Rubbing her wrist, the girl tries to understand why Castan was only interested in the ring the last time they met. He tried to snatch the thing, and then just asked to give him what was on his finger, but you can't give up that easily. Setting the condition, the blonde asks her to tell her why the guy is so obsessed with him, and then she can answer his question. Changing position, and finding herself in the middle of the alley, The maiden keeps repeating what would be unfair if she were the only person to answer the question. The best thing to do would be to not hide anything. Already about to turn around and leave or start swearing, the girl is interrupted by a man's voice. She seemed to have been looking for someone recently for hours. Pointing at the crowd of people going back and forth, it was as if the man was convincing her that she couldn't do it by herself. If she tells him everything, he can help, since he is an aristocrat. Freezing, the blonde realizes she's running out of time. They're pushing the hardest, so we have to do what Castan wants us to do. Otherwise, it can only get worse. So she talks about the fact that she was given the item by a complete stranger. It was indeed the first time the maiden had met that old lady. She was selling trinkets, and then started insulting the young lady. Wanting to apologize, she made a gift for the girl. Remembering the details proved to be quite difficult. She was wearing a red cloak with the hood down, which made it impossible to see the color of her hair. The only distinguishing feature appeared to be the purple-colored eyes. Castan freezes, trying to collate all the facts as well as check in his head. He didn't want the girl to lie, or things could end badly. Looking into the girl's eyes, he suddenly let out a phrase thoughtfully that seemed like it could turn everything upside down. The eyes were probably the exact same color as the person across the room. Her pupils shrink as the girl tries to digest all the information she just received. Gently placing her fingers on her cheek near her eye, she realizes that when she saw the old woman, she didn't consider this detail. Breaking from her thoughts, the beauty nods. The color of the eyes was indeed like hers, and only now was she able to recall the encounter in fine detail. Sighing, the prince promises, in that he will help find that grandmother. Almost bouncing with joy, Arundel lights up with happiness, then begins to smile. She really wished she could finally figure out the whole situation. The next words become the worst she's ever heard in her life, replacing the previous ones and making the joy fade away. She has to sell her ring in return for help. The best solution now would be to try to escape or refuse, so shaking her head, the maiden refuses to sell him, to which she is offered any payment, which naturally doesn't work. Finding even more chutzpah, the guy asks her to just hand over the jewelry if she's so reluctant to get paid for it. This triggers a new burst of unconscious anger. Trying not to call the man crazy again, the lady tries to pretend that she doesn't understand anything, as she was about to leave a long time ago because she doesn't want to waste precious time. Turning around, she quickly heads away from the alley, saying goodbye to the young man in passing. She'd better stop now, lest she get herself into trouble, but the words passed her ears. Realizing it's worth at least trying to explain herself, the beauty stops to make her intentions known, completely missing another cloaked man standing around the corner. Switching to screaming, the protagonist refuses again, realizing that she really doesn't want to sell or give the item away. In all this time, the ring had become dear to her, especially since it had saved her life so many times. Before she can say anything else, the beauty freezes. An arrow that was aimed at something else, so it didn't find its target, flew a centimeter from my face. Letting out a hoarse scream, the girl falls to the ground, pressing her hand to her ear. An eerie whistling sound seemed to lodge itself in his head after the gun was so close. Pulling out his sword, the man repeats his request once more, but in an instructive way. He asked for help, but no one wanted to listen to him, even though he had much advice to offer to save his own life. At the other end of the alley, directly across from the prince, stand several men with weapons in their hands. It is immediately clear that they are serious, but their purpose is unclear. Everything becomes clear when one of the guys, who is the most important, orders Castan to be captured. More details regarding this case will be available later, while for now, all that is left to do is attempt to fight back while all the warriors attack one by one. The confrontation promises to be brutal, but extremely fast because of the Emperor's skills. The brunette has been learning the skill for more than a year, while preparing an attack on the throne, so he easily reflects the first and second attack. Swinging his sword sideways, dispersing the servants without any injuries, the guy tries to force his way to the main man, who obviously decided not to participate so actively in the attack. One of the guys, receiving one of the hardest blows, is ready to drop dead, making some incomprehensible sound and trying to catch his breath. It's hard not to get tired because of these activities where your life is on the line. Without distracting himself from the battle, the young man tries to quickly run through the most interesting versions of events in his head. There's quite a large group of people here, which means there's a question as to who dared to send them, knowing the status of the person who will be attacked. One of the most obvious choices is the Empress. The woman clearly dislikes Castan, believing that her son is obligated to take the throne simply because she is his mother and the emperor's lawful wife. Could it have been someone else? Rising from the ground, the blonde tries to come to her senses. The fight started too quickly and extremely unexpectedly, making it feel strange. Now's the time to escape before it gets any further. As she is about to carefully make her way out of this strange alleyway, the girl heads for the exit, but a gloved palm grabs her neck, almost grazing her cheek, which is bruised from the arrow. Castan freezes up, stopping the fight around him. His eyes widen slightly, showing his anxiety, which was completely unfounded. The blue-haired man, who hadn't participated the entire time, was obviously monitoring the condition of the would-be captive. Putting a knife to his throat, he insists that the prince come with them. The brunette does not find the show in question fun, so he asks what will happen if he refuses. If things do not turn out the way the enemies need, the protagonist will be deprived of her head in front of the emperor, while the sin will lie precisely on his soul. The words seem a bit too cold, even for someone as ignorant as this ignoramus. He doesn't care, so guys are at liberty to do whatever they want, regardless of what the consequences are. He is no longer human in the girl's eyes. Castan would even be grateful if the knights handed him her corpse after she was taken from her life. She has something he needs to take, and then Arundel will cease to be of any value again. Thinking about what happened in the past, the girl is ready to cry. No one would want to die time after time, and then have their only chance at resurrection taken away from them, leaving them all alone. Almost then, snapping out of it, realizing that things are definitely not going exactly the way they're supposed to, the blonde starts swearing. She begs to be saved, for the very sensations when the strength slowly leaves the body can't be compared to any type of pain. Taking a step back, the brunette is still just as adamant. He seems to have his own calculations going on in his head on how and where to capitalize for himself. Smirking, after some amazing plan clearly pops into his head, the man asks what he will get in return. He only wants one thing, so it's in his best interest to get the ring at any cost. Already about to open her mouth to agree, and then just run away and disappear somewhere between the houses, the blonde hears the words that lying is forbidden. He will immediately realize she is trying to lie and save herself. I do not want to recognize the deplorability of the situation, but this guy is now the only one who can save the beauty from imminent death. Swallowing noisily, the lady tries to keep her cool. Clenching her hand into a fist, the beauty ponders what she should do in such a strange situation. She can't just hand over the resurrection ring, because she still hasn't had a meeting with Castan, which means if something goes wrong, she'll be dead forever. The words again, like thunder, spread like thunder right overhead, flying into my ears. She is emphatically asked not to lie in such a situation because her life is now in grave danger. Deciding to take this step, the blonde says that she will think about it later. The main thing now was to speak as vaguely as possible so no one would know what she meant. If time could be stretched out, perhaps she could save her life and not even use the ring. Smiling his nasty smile, the prince notices that the beauty is holding her position quite well. Right now, it would be better to try to improve and increase your life expectancy instead of being sarcastic. Judging by the heroine's behavior, you could say that she possesses immortality. Trying to pretend that she doesn't know anything, the young lady talks about how it makes no sense. She would have liked to beat the arrogant young man with her own hands, but she had no right to do so. With his pure and kind heart, the man even offered his help in exchange for the ring, but seems less than magnanimous to exchange her life for having her fingers cut off to remove the thing. It's completely irrelevant. The figure of another enemy dressed in a dark cloak forms behind the prince. It seems as if his face is black because of shadows or some kind of paint. Freezing, while trying not to twitch so as not to hurt herself, the girl tries to warn Castan, even if it's at the very last moment. Turning sharply around, the man deftly crouches down, delivering one by one blows to the guy who dared to attack him. The sword slides from side to side while remaining firmly clutched in the palm of his hand. Knocking the knife out of his opponent's hands, the young man gets into a defensive stance, drawing his weapon. He's not going to take anyone's life, at least not at this point in time. Everything will be left to the very last moment. The heroine didn't even notice it right away, but it's worth admitting that Castan turned out to be pretty good at fighting. One could look at it from a different angle, but it was now only possible to appreciate it in that position. It just begs the question of what's up with the brunette now. He fights like a panther with the quickness of his movements. Each one is calibrated, thus helping to stay afloat. The only question that remains is what's wrong with him now. The injury makes a guy want to clam up and cry. He can't show his weak side, which in fact simply doesn't exist, or it will undermine his entire public image. Things would have been much simpler if the knife had simply been sharpened, but the situation was getting more complicated. There was poison on the blade, which now, after the cut, slowly began to seep into his blood and body. Exhaling air, trying to set his mind to successfully end this fight as quickly as possible, before the poison fully penetrates and boots the blood inside, the man stands like this, turning his back to the couple standing a meter away from him. Arundel froze as if stooped, no longer trying to twitch to break free of the strong grip. There is a horror in the eyes that goes somewhere from the mind, thus showing the excitement of a vivid emotion. Breaking down into a scream, the beauty tries to scream the name of a man she doesn't even know, just calling him a psycho once again. She absolutely doesn't care, but if he doesn't do anything, she could die once again. Upon smelling the foul odor of something nasty, the lady tries to twirl in different directions while a napkin is placed to her mouth to make her unconscious and alert. For some reason, the enemies decided to drag the young lady with them. Memories pop up in my mind as if long forgotten, memories that are already extremely difficult to reconstruct in my mind. The man sitting at the table across from the boy tells of how the first emperor ascended the throne and became the ruler of Trapeum. God cared for his descendants and loved them. He realized that blood would be shed because of the throne and more than once because of strife and human nature. He didn't want this to happen on a permanent basis until the state was gone. It was then that he came up with a simply brilliant idea on how to optimize the right process. He draped it with a special symbol that could save thousands of lives, and that is black hair, as without it, everything was considered invalid. Lifting up from his chair to leave the table, the guy kept talking about this distinctive trait. Anyone who didn't have it couldn't even claim to be a true emperor. Leaning down and leaning against the tabletop, the brunette comes even closer to the kid, who, perplexed, just looks into the eyes of his interlocutor. Putting his hand on the boy's shoulder, his father asks him to remember this important detail, whatever happens, because otherwise he will never have any chance of knowing a better life. The child is none other than Castan, who still listens attentively to his father. Snow-white hair clustered lightly on his head, while a few of them fell over the young man's face. Daring to ask a few questions, the boy asks why he should remember the detail in question. For him, as the owner of blonde hair, all doors are immediately closed, and nothing can affect it. Dropping to his knees and grabbing his son's shoulders, the man, as if in desperation, begins to try to convince him to listen to him. It's all just because he said so, and therefore has no logical explanation. Smiling slightly, an almost too invisible smile, the man assures them that against their will, he will be able to do something. There's still a chance, which means all that's left is to keep hope alive in your head. The next lines come out less clear as everything begins to blur, preparing to carry Castan back to reality, leaving him with no intelligible explanation. Someone's voice nearby yells at the young man, ordering him to wake up and preferably soon. The eyelids feel like concrete, and because of the incredible heaviness, it is almost unrealistic to open them fully. On his cheek is a mark of blows that must have been used to try and wake Demeter up. The first picture becomes a blonde woman only a meter away from his body. She tries to scream for him to wake up soon. Her face shows unconcealed fear and confusion, for this is probably the first time she has been in such a situation. Bypassing the man, the lady stops somewhere off to the side, thus giving a view of the wooden door, which is boarded up. Virgo rejoices that the companion has finally come to his senses after a long blackout. Still feeling the bright, burning sensation on his cheek, the boy wants to touch the place of pain, but his hands are just as bound. This woman has no idea at all who she just raised her hand to, because if she knew he was a prince, she would definitely be acting very differently. Trying not to show her emotions, the lady adjusts her voice to the right tone. She talks about how scared she was. For some reason, the idea came into her head that the guy was just plain dead, and now she couldn't do anything, because no one would save her. Shifting his gaze to the girl, Castan begins to notice small details that can't be picked up on right away. Her face is quite pale, and her body is trembling. Wanting to hug Arundel, however, that is a normal reaction for someone in this situation. As if deciding on something, the girl exhales air with a loud noise accompanying it. It seems that it meant a lot to her to be useful to the cause. The face displays a determination that shows that the lady is clearly up to something, which means that a plan can appear as if by itself out of nowhere. My hair is flying up on my forehead while my hands are tied, giving me no opportunity to correct it. Disregarding the temporary inconvenience, the girl promises to tell what she has learned in all this time while the man was out. A little surprised, but still just as arrogant, the brunette continues to glare at the girl as she begins her story. They're on the beach right now, so you can smell the raw fish. All this time, the beauty had only felt him, so she was able to deal with everything. Arundel turned out to be a much smarter person. After only an hour had passed since their arrival, she woke up, but pretended to still be unconscious. Acting and a role played at the highest level gave her the opportunity to overhear the conversations of two men in dark cloaks. From what the gang said, someone should be coming here soon. The only thing left to do is to wait for what happens, but it brings no joy. For once the man arrives, they intend to kill them both and throw them into the sea. Frowning, the guy tries to digest the information he just received so he can start thinking as soon as possible. The only surprising thing is how quickly the girl grasps the situation literally on the fly. It only took her a little time to find out everything and then draw her own conclusions. Realizing what awaits them, the brunette suddenly speaks of the obviousness of things that don't seem so to the young lady, who interjects to ask what he means. Fear clenches his entire gut, even to the point of finally pronouncing the sentence. Sighing, the interlocutor says that the enemies are planning to drown them both in the sea, because if you believe the words of the heroine, they are on some island. The situation is starting to get steeper and steeper. This method of murder is the easiest, because if you tie a rock to your ankle, it will be easy to end it all, and it is also very easy to cover up the crime. A boulder on your foot will prevent you from being able to swim to the surface once your body is in salt water. Terror envelops the body and mind. The girl has been tried in many ways, but no one has ever tried to drown her. Each time it was Castan who found the most trivial options to end the life of an enemy. However, now things were different. Leaning in too dead and preparing to cry, the maiden asks what they should do, because even about the presence of the ring, she realizes that such feelings will be impossible to forget. We should get out of here soon, for our own good and future lives. Jumping up, the lady holds out her hands as if trying to point out the ropes that constrain the movement of her arms. First, you need to get rid of this happiness, and only after that look for a way out and a plan to escape from here. An ominous silence hangs over the room as the girl scrutinizes her companion's movements. Confusion mixed with anger lingers while she asks how he managed to pull off the trap trick. It seems as if the lady has been hit over the head with something heavy, because she's going to be pretty helpless considering the fact that she can't do anything. Fingers slid gently along, trying to do their thing deftly and as quickly as possible. The hands are released, and the rope falls down on its own to the concrete floor, no longer enclosing the man in its power. Answering the silliest question with a rather logical answer, the brunette says that he merely untied the rope, thus helping himself. There was nothing complicated, even if at first glance it seemed completely unrealistic. Tossing some iron thing into his companion's hands, the guy explains exactly how he was able to pull it all off. If you find yourself in this situation a few times, the next time you'll be prepared in advance by bringing the right escape supplies. Lowering her interested gaze, the girl notices that it is only an iron bracelet. It seems that Castan was very agile and therefore was able to free himself quickly with the help of this item. Not wanting to wait any longer or wait to be killed, the man drives the girl over. If she understood, then she could get down to business to stop annoying him with her presence. It's like I can hear some strange noises in my head. The pupils shrink as the eyes begin to nervously run from side to side, trying to find the cause of the sounds and where exactly they are coming from. Turning to Castan, the maiden looks at him point blank, as if to hint that they are not alone here, or someone is approaching their cell very quickly and swiftly. My gut is churning with everything that's going on. I'd like to believe that she just heard her and their immediate end isn't coming now. There's no one to look to for support, and there's probably no point in running anywhere. The brunette turns toward the door, glimpsing the exit, and then turns to the blonde, who tries to convince him that they are in danger, even though the man understands everything even without words. One thing becomes clear: none of them are wrong, and it's not just paranoia. Heavy footsteps can be heard in the hallway, which means someone is walking towards the room to surely finish the job they failed to do earlier. Reacting quickly in an attempt to resolve the situation, the guy advises the girl to hide as soon as the door opens so she won't be immediately spotted, thus raising panic and helping them slip away. Not understanding exactly what the young man means, the beautiful girl interjects, hoping that someone will explain to her the reason, as well as the plan of action to be carried out. Without explaining anything, the guy just asks to stay out of his way, thus ruining the whole situation. Conversations are interrupted by the horrible rattle of the lock on the outside, announcing that a certain person is just around the corner. Swinging the door open, a short-stature brown-haired man enters the room, probably to check on the captives and their condition. It was worth reporting to management whether any of them had come to their senses or not. Freezing, the young man tries to digest what he has just seen, eyes darting from side to side, trying to locate the right object that has gone somewhere. The chamber is completely empty. Not a single soul, because everyone had managed to simply run away so they wouldn't be killed or tortured. None of the subjects knew that the situation would turn out this way, or that Castan and his girlfriend would prove to be so nimble. Trying to shout to sound the alarm, the man begins to stutter. He is completely oblivious to the back exit, where a second later the prince is about to attack, thus blocking the airway. Grabbing his neck, keeping his hand right on his throat, the guy tries not to do too much damage, but definitely provide the pair with a free exit. Under all circumstances, this brown-haired man should not interfere with their plan. The man begins to slowly suffocate, and so drops everything he was holding in his hands. He tries to break free, but realizing it's not working, he slowly pulls a knife out of his pocket. No longer making any attempt to escape, he simply reaches out and sharply plants his weapon directly into his opponent's body. He didn't want to do that, to leave the man in the same condition until his master arrived, but he had no other choice. The blonde can see everything going on perfectly. Knife in the foot seems to be one of the most secretive behaviors. Trying to hurt the man without the man noticing, the fact that he was going to get hurt, the brown man acted meanly, which left the beauty stunned. Abruptly landing on the floor, the girl picks up the tray that a visiting servant had dropped just a few minutes ago. He was wearing something else, but the lady decided not to use unnecessary things in battle so as not to waste time. Furiously clutching the thing in her hands, the girl runs closer and swings it toward the guy's head with all her might. Rage finds its solace, thus spilling itself outward. Letting out a slight scream, as if it wouldn't work without it, the girl brings the iron down on her opponent's head with force. Unable to contain himself when this ignoramus came here to further harm the couple and has already done something terrible. The brown-haired man, making a quiet sound, slowly settles into Castan's arms. The strength leaves his body and also blacks out, while the prince standing behind him stares in surprise at the whole scene, which he clearly didn't expect to see. The girl sets the tray down, watching as the brunette lets go of her opponent, letting the body fall to the stone floor with a clatter. He didn't care about his condition, for he was the one who had done even more damage to the others. Still in slight confusion, the young man tries to find out how the lady managed to react and work so quickly and clearly without any training in such matters. Completely oblivious to the words spoken to her, the blonde squatted down to be level with the emperor's foot. A scarlet stain can be seen on his leg, evidence of a wound that surely makes his entire body clench in pain. Asking if everything is all right, the maiden exhales quietly, seeing the droplets trickling down. Things work out in a rather strange way, because the man really can't figure out this girl and her motives at all. Stepping away from the beauty, thus causing her to freeze, the brunette pretends that he's not in any pain at all and doesn't need any help. There are far more important things to do right now than your own health. The rest of the men should be arriving soon to check on why he hasn't returned. Usually, the right thing doesn't take more than 10 minutes, so that's all the time they have in reserve for now. Unbuttoning his shirt, the guy tries diligently to remove one of the buttons while keeping his mouth shut. There should be sentries outside, through which you should pass as discreetly as possible. The interviewee has already said this, but if you manage to get into the same situation many times, you'll always be prepared. The button is clutched in his fingers, while the young man swings the thing somewhere to the side. A hand, as if in slow motion, tosses the thing up. The young man makes the point that the friend should be ready to make her escape, not waiting and trying to look around for another dozen minutes. The place where the thing was thrown lights up with a bright flame, illuminating everything around it, thus attracting everyone's attention. Most likely, the sentry guards noticed something amiss from their posts as well. Castan seems completely calm when as his companion freezes, continuing to flap her eyes in surprise. She had expected anything but this outcome, which no longer seemed like such a good plan for her. Trying to figure out what these magical buttons were, the maiden is interrupted by the boy's words. He's talking about the fact that they should move forward. On the other side of the corridor, somewhere at the very end, concerned voices begin to be heard, asking each other what all the noise is about since everything was quiet before. The guy turns around and heads for the exit to the street, which is in a broken window and wall. If they jump, they'll die, because it's pretty high up there. However, if they don't, things will get much worse and more dire for both of them. Still trying to object somehow, the blonde hears approaching footsteps that turn to running with high progression. There's still no choice, even if the diva would like to find out what's going on first. She's already been told they'll die if they don't escape, so deciding to forget about everything, the beauty starts running and then jumps outside. A rushed flight feels like 15 minutes long, even though everything happened extremely fast. Flying towards the ground, roughly realizing the collision that awaits her, the girl decides to give one last shout-out about how she regrets nothing. She had no choice, and perhaps this method would be less painful. Plunging into an abyss of water that intends to take on a body like her own in coolness, the girl surfaces. There is not enough air, so the maiden tries to cough up the excess fluid from her lungs as quickly as possible.